right, so thank you everybody for joining today's session. Hopefully you're here for DevSecOps. We're going to be talking about Amazon EKS and Sumo Logic. And so wanted to introduce ourselves. So my name is Josh Brothheim. My image should be coming up. There I am. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's session. Like I said, my name is Josh Brothheim. I'm from Sumo Logic. I am the training manager at Sumo Logic. I deliver a lot of our trainings, design some of our content. And so I'll be speaking a little bit later when we start to discuss Sumo Logic and how it fits into this picture. My peer and co-host is Dilip Rajan from Amazon, or AWS, he's going to be leading the beginning portion of the session. So kind of tag teaming, he'll do the early portion, I'll do the later, and we have a fun session for you today. So Dilip, you want to take it away?
Yeah.
Cool.
For sure. Hey, thanks, Josh, and hi, everybody. Thanks for joining this presentation about DevSecOps. We want to talk about Sumo and AWS together, but when we were thinking about this, we thought Kubernetes would be a great topic to discuss, especially Amazon EKS. So I certainly appreciate you attending with us. I've been with Amazon for over 6 years, and I've been working very closely with Sumo for over 18 months. So I'm happy to take this away and talk about all of the capabilities of Sumo and AWS. All right, so as a part of today's agenda, we'll go through what is Kubernetes, doing some sort of introduction on Amazon EKS. I'll give you sort of a high-level overview of what that is. We'll talk a little bit about the EKS and Sumo Logic integration, and then I'll hand it over to Josh for the walkthrough of what Sumo Logic does in terms of supporting EKS. And then, of course, we'll have QA and wrap up before we do an event survey. Josh, anything to add there? I know this was something that you wanted to also cover for the second half of this agenda.
No, just want to get people excited because we're going to do some labs in the second half. So while the first half is going to be informative and Dilip's going to give some great info and some slides presentation, in the second half, we'll be jumping into Sumo Logic and actually using the application. So I hope you stick around for that. But yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Cool. Awesome. For the first slide, let me just talk a little bit about what is Kubernetes really. So if you think about Kubernetes as an open source container management and orchestration platform, it really can be run anywhere, right? That's the key value proposition of Kubernetes from an open source management platform perspective. So whether you're running it on-premises or whether you're running it on cloud, your application which runs on Kubernetes can be deployed anywhere. In addition to that, what Kubernetes also does for you is to help your containers run at scale and come up with features and capabilities that allow your application to be properly distributed with a lot of security in place. For example, a 12-factor app pattern sort of authentication. In addition to that, Kubernetes also allows your organization to deploy and manage applications like on a platform as a service, or for batch processing workers, or for microservices on the cloud at scale. So how do we do that, and how do we do that from like let's take a look at it from a 100 or 10,000 foot level, right? What typically happens is in Kubernetes, we create an abstraction layer on top of a bunch of hosts. The development teams can then let the Kubernetes manage the hosting of functions, including sort of creating load balancing, monitoring, controlling of resource consumption by either a team or by an application. It can also help with limiting resource consumption or leveraging more resources from a different host. So, or from a different cluster of nodes or from other workflows. So that's why you need a Kubernetes orchestration layer on top of it. And we feel that Amazon EKS is the best fit that allows you to create that control plane to manage your containers, not only from a scalability and performance perspective, but also from a security standpoint. From a connectivity standpoint, and many other capabilities that I'm going to talk to you about in the next slide. So what we've heard from a lot of customers is that Kubernetes simplifies the deployment and management of containerized application, and it is backended by the cloud native computing foundation. However, managing Kubernetes is really hard, right? So the open source foundation basically provides you the ability to configure and run containerized applications at production, and it sort of does all the plumbing work for you, right? It does the configuration, the networking, the storage of your applications. So teams are actually free with that open source version through CNCF for running their Kubernetes application. And they can choose a variety of capabilities from a very thriving and a vibrant ecosystem from the community, and with consistent open APIs and a broad-based flexibility, right? So that's why Kubernetes is picking up a lot, but customers are struggling with increased operational overhead, right? Running clusters at a production scale is complicated, and it requires significant trained resources who are going to be able to spend a sufficient amount of time to manage upgrades, do monitoring, and then scaling their control plane. Not to mention the fact that you also have to spend substantial amount of resources in application lifecycle development, as well as operationalizing your software and many more. These are definitely some of the core pain points in terms of the cluster management, in terms of resources. Then you have the software management for operations. And then, of course, you on top of that, and probably the most important, is that you need to ensure that the workloads are secure without having any vulnerabilities. This creates more operational overhead in addition to the challenges of running and scaling a cluster, running the operational software. And a business doesn't really want to spend a lot of time and effort on doing that. And our customers have asked us to focus on managing that application, or managing the clusters, the security, the software, and leave the application and code logic to them. Right? This is what they want to do, so that they can add value to the products, to their products by delivering capabilities for their end users. So this is why they asked Amazon to see if they can come up with some sort of undifferentiated heavy lifting of managing security and operationalizing Kubernetes at scale. So this is really the reason and the crux of why EKS came into being. And in the third slide, I would like to sort of talk to you about why EKS, right? What is Amazon Elastic Kubernetes service, and then how does that help? Right. So here, it's not just about the underlying cloud platform. It's also about the platform that can provide you the speed, stability, scalability for all of your applications, and how it will sort of make your customers really happy. So just another slide to depict the core concepts that I was talking to you about in the previous one. Ultimately, we want to be in the business of creating new features and new experiences for our customers and end users and customers, and that's what we want to help our businesses and our customers scale at. Here's where we believe Amazon EKS is the best place to run Kubernetes, where throughout the capabilities of understanding Kubernetes. When Amazon first released EKS, a lot of cumbersome steps that you were doing for yourself, like creating the Kubernetes master cluster, configuring the service discovery, doing the Kubernetes primitives, networking. In addition to that, the existing tools and methods, and doing them with minimal pods, if any. So these were some of the sort of nuts and bolts activities that management of Kubernetes requires. With Amazon EKS, the Kubernetes control plane, including the backend persistence layer, along with the API servers, they provision and scale across various availability zones, resulting in high availability and eliminating a single point of failure, right? So when unhealthy control plane nodes are detected, they are replaced and patched by the control plane itself. Now, that results in a resilient AWS managed Kubernetes cluster that can withstand even the loss of an availability zone, right? All organizations can also choose to run their EKS using AWS Fargate, which is a serverless compute engine for containers. With Fargate, there is no longer a need to provision and manage servers. So in Kubernetes, you still have to have you still have to identify in EKS, for example, you still have to identify a cluster and a set of nodes. With Fargate, it's completely touchless, where you don't have to provision and manage the servers. Organizations can go and specify and simply pay for these resources they're sort of using per application. And Fargate sort of does the isolation by design and for improved security. And of course, as a part of the AWS landscape, EKS really integrates with a variety of AWS services. That makes it easy for containers and the EKS application to integrate with monitoring, with governance, with the database servers, with security capabilities like encryption and Amazon KMS, key management service, using AWS identity and access management for authentication, and then for elastic load balancing and so forth, so on and so forth. So there are many capabilities certainly that we talk about, and I can go into a lot more detail here, but just want to give you a high level view of why EKS is the best place to run Kubernetes workloads on the cloud. Okay, cool. So I want to jump real quick into this slide, which talks about EKS and Sumo Logic. So as you know, I do work with Sumo on a consistent basis. And back in 2019, Sumo released support for EKS consumption, where Sumo leverages all of the open source technologies that you see in this slide here, the FluentBit, FluentD, Prometheus, Falco, of course, CloudWatch is AWS, but these are the core open source technologies that are available for collection of logs, events, and metrics from the EKS clusters. This sort of control plane architecture provides the control plane for in EKS where all the logging of auditing information and logs are directly done into the EKS control plane through, for example, CloudWatch. And all of that is logged into the AWS account. And these logs are eventually forwarded to Sumo Logic using an AWS Lambda forwarder. So that's really what the sort of if you take the Sumo Logic and EKS integration, when you install that app, what it does for you is that it does the installation of the forwarding of the CloudWatch events and logs from Kubernetes control plane into Sumo Logic. So that the bottom line that you see over there from control plane logs, CloudWatch to Sumo Logic, that's what's depicted as a part of that installation and configuration of the log collection from Sumo Logic. So that's really the cool value add that you get in addition to the collection from using various open source technologies. What really shines in terms of Sumo's integration with EKS is the fact that it makes it easy for one to not only consider Kubernetes deployment on Amazon, but also makes it easy for other Kubernetes environments, say, for example, running on premises, other cloud providers, other data centers. And when you want to move those type of workloads to EKS, Sumo Logic makes the visibility and observability and security of those migrations faster and easier through the installation of various capabilities within Sumo. For example, the one that I'm talking about in terms of EKS and Lambda forwarding through CloudWatch, that same capability is available through open source collection. And that's really where the ability to go from start to sort of detecting events, taking action on those events, all of that happens pretty seamlessly as far as Sumo Logic is concerned. So that ability to sort of go across various platforms is where really Sumo Logic shines. All right, so just last slide before I hand it over to Josh, I do want to talk a little bit about the shared responsibility model and EKS security best practices. So this is a DevSecOps talk. So one of the most important things is we talk about how cool EKS is, we talk about how cool the Sumo Logic and EKS integration is, and where Sumo Logic really shines. But I would be remiss if I don't talk a little bit about the fact that while there are some out-of-the-box capabilities with EKS, there are some best practices, and AWS does believe in the shared responsibility model, where we're responsible for the infrastructure and providing you the tools and best practices, but ultimately implementing that and making sure that your applications are secure is a joint responsibility between us and our customers. So there are various pillars of the shared responsibility model for EKS security. So I just want to quickly run through this, but we want to make sure that Kubernetes applications, especially on EKS, they are conforming to the identity and access management roles and policies. But more importantly, we also want to spend time and effort making sure that the pod security and multi-tenancy is in place. So what we do in that case is there are some native capabilities within EKS that can help you with pod security and multi-tenancy. But we also profess that you could use third parties, for example, Sumo Logic, and our partners to secure and look at pod security in a better way. So that you can do image scanning or things like that. You could do it with third-party software, and then you can use those logs and events within Sumo Logic. You want to make sure that network security and defective controls are in place. Last but not, certainly not the least, at the bottom of that left side, where secrets management and data encryption are enabled by default. So these are on the left-hand side, there are certainly most important basic activities that need to be done. On the right-hand side, you will talk about the more nuts and bolts infrastructure, which you simply should take into consideration no matter what, which is runtime security. When the pods are running, are they vulnerable? Did you provide root access to the pod? Those type of considerations are really important. We also talk about overall infrastructure security. Regulatory compliance is important. Really important is if there is a vulnerability and if there is some sort of intrusion that has taken place within your containerized Kubernetes applications, there is incident response and forensics that's done with vendors like and folks like Sumo Logic. And finally, last but not the least, we can build all of the applications, but once your image is available to be run in a Kubernetes application, we want to make sure that the image itself is secure, and then there are scanning capabilities that are available on the image that can detect any issues with vulnerabilities. So it's really important that we look at the shared responsibility model across all of these 10 or 11 pillars, and we make sure that there is a holistic view of what are the best practices from an EKS security perspective. And at the bottom, I shared an open GitHub link where you can take a look at all of these best practices. Many of them are recommendations, but there are some recommendations in terms of products and services and tools also that are available, which you could leverage for improving the security posture of your Elastic Kubernetes service on Amazon. And that's all of the areas that I wanted to cover. Hopefully this was a useful bit of information, but I think over to the fun areas where Josh is going to cover. Josh is going to cover what we have on Sumo and the labs.
Cool. Thanks, Dilip. And certainly if there's any questions or comments, feel free to use the chat. I should have mentioned that at the beginning of the session, but we're here. So all right, so I'm going to do some more slides. Get ready for a visual change. We were using black slides or dark slides. Now we're going to go to white. So just want to let you know before your eyes get shot out. There we go. So different scheme, but I wanted to talk about where Kubernetes needs help. So log data is going to provide crucial insights into potential security breaches, and it's critical for investigating past security events. However, while Kubernetes provides facilities for generating log data, it provides no features for auditing or interpreting that data for any purpose, least of all for security. And so you therefore need to adopt third-party tools to leverage security log data as a basis for security operations. Now, there we go. So As alluded to, Kubernetes poses some unique security challenges. So I grouped the challenges into three buckets, if you will, or three pods, if you will, but three groupings. So the first one on the far left is the pod and network policies. And so as it says, not to read you the slide, but security policies are provided, but they're not enabled. They may not be or are not customized to your team's needs. And so you may need to do some configuration to protect and encrypt your network. That's one challenge. Another challenge is around host security. You need to have a strong hosting support, such as AWS. You can enable things like SE Linux or App Armor, but these are, once again, other considerations, other things to remember. And then that abuse of the Kubernetes API. So there's RBAC and security policy settings that you'll define, but for Kubernetes, there's really nothing that's going to help detect or respond to API abuse. You can use things like Amazon EKS to start to monitor that API activity. And then you can use Sumo to audit the EKS. And we're going to do an example of that shortly, but 5 minutes, get to it pretty quickly. Just a few more slides here. Now, auto discovery is a feature of Sumo Logic related to Kubernetes, and it's really helpful because it's going to, as the name implies, it's going to auto discover your information. So that infrastructure is going to be constantly updated automatically. You don't need to do anything. As you look into the app or as you view these panels, and we're going to view similar panels shortly, for example, here we're showing the honeycomb scheme is showing us green, good, red, bad. We get a very easy interface to start to understand things. And as these pods get stood up and stood down, auto discovery is really going to help us here. So it's going to do discovery automatically. It's as the name implies. Now, security is going to be a part of that solution, and we'll look at, I'll show you this in app as well. And so what we can start to do is start to see rules that might have been triggered, and who were they triggered by? So here, for example, we see rules that were triggered by two different users, the root user and the KOps user. We see the rules that were triggered by priority in the top right up here. So we can start to see what type of rules were triggered. Was it a debug? Was it a priority? Was it a warning? And we're going to handle those probably quite differently. And they can be triggered, as it shows on the right-hand side of the screen, just in those bullet points, the fact that you can trigger by user or by parent process. So you have the ability to query in many different ways, which is helpful, of course. All right, got 2 more slides here. Now, for the DevSecOps group or folks, the Amazon EKS app is going to be best. So that Amazon EKS, that Amazon Elastic Kubernetes Service, for those of you that don't know what EKS stands for, although I feel like everybody in this audience probably does, that's going to allow you to easily deploy, manage, and scale those container-based applications with Kubernetes on AWS. Now, what I'm showing here is our Sumo Logic app, and we're going to look at apps once again in the application shortly. But this app has been designed specifically for Amazon EKS, specifically the control plane app. What this is going to allow you to do is provide visibility into your EKS control plane with operational insights into the API server, the scheduler, the control manager, the worker nodes. And these apps are going to be pre-configured dashboards that are going to display the resource-related metrics for Kubernetes deployments, clusters, namespaces, pods, containers, and daemon sets. All that information is going to be essentially very easily viewable in Sumo Logic with the addition of our app. And we're going to utilize these apps, like I said, in just really about 2 minutes. I'm getting very close. One last slide. Now, as it says here, Kubernetes is already installed and configured in the training lab environment, which we're going to use shortly, so you don't have to do any of this work. And so this is great because we can start analyzing data right away. But if you wanted to install and configure Kubernetes in your own environment, and I'm not encouraging you to do this right now, or at least for this session, but we do have a Kubernetes Helm installation self-paced course. And so this is something that probably only admins would do and likely once, but it is helpful if you do want to, like I said, install Kubernetes on your own device. You may know how to, there's other tutorials, but we wanted to show you how. And I will point that out once we get into the application, which we're going to do right now. So what I'd like us to do for today is to log into Sumo Logic. Now, I've created some training accounts. Well, I have a training environment for you that I use on a regular basis, but I've created some accounts that we're going to utilize for today. So what I want you to do is log into Sumo Logic for today, if you can, if you want to. If you don't want to participate, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to demonstrate everything on the screen and walk you through it. But if you want to play with us, please do. The login, or the URL, excuse me, more specifically, is going to be service.sumologic.com. The account we're going to use for the email, we're going to use these credentials of training plus analyst number. And I want you to decide what number you want to be. So you want to be a 3-digit number. Maybe you want to be training plus analyst 007. Maybe you want to be training plus analyst 057, as I have on the screen. Training plus analyst 692, 418. Doesn't matter. Pick a 3-digit number. And then for the password, we're going to use security 22 exclamation point with a capital S. So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and log in right now. I'm going to log in as well. Once you're logged in, if you can let me know that you're logged in. Oh, let me go ahead and put those credentials back into the chat. I didn't do that properly. Now you should be able to see them. And so let's go ahead and log into Sumo Logic. So let me go ahead and just do so. So I'm going to create a new tab. I'm going to go to the website, which you may be familiar with. You may not. That's fine, but that's where we have our login for the application. And now I'm going to log in. So I'm going to use training plus analyst. I use 234 for no reason whatsoever. Sumologic.com. And then I'm going to type in that password of capital SECURITY 22 exclamation point. Once you're logged in, you should be looking at a screen that's going to look very similar to mine. You might have some additional tabs opened up here, just to show you what additional tabs might look like. If you do, you can go ahead and close them. But ultimately, I'd like you to get on a screen that looks really close to this. Now, something I should have done earlier as well, let me go ahead and put in a lab guide that I created. So I'm going to upload this. Just give me a moment here. So it's uploading. It's a PDF. If you can access it, great. If you can't, also, you can just follow along without it. The labs aren't that crazy or in depth. And if you could just type the 3-digit number you're using once you're logged in, that would just be nice confirmation that we're all kind of together. If somebody else is using the same 3-digit number as you, it's not a problem, especially for today. It just doesn't matter. But just so we can make sure we're all sorted together. So, all right, cool. Justin's in. And let me pull up that lab guide as well. So what this lab guide should look like is a lab guide. Let me go ahead. I'm going to kind of put it over to the side here. All right, cool. Fernando's logging good. And these credentials that I'm giving you to utilize, you're welcome to use them after today. I'll show you another way to get your own personal Sumo account, not plugging Sumo in that respect, but just if you want to jump into the system. But you're welcome to use these credentials. They do reset every month. The month just started, so these are going to be good for another 3 weeks. But feel free to utilize them. And so once we're in the lab guide, we have 3, actually, technically, we have 4 labs. Lab 0 is logging in, which we now should be completing. So hopefully we're logged in. Once again, if you need help or have questions, give a shout. I don't want to leave anybody behind. All right. So lab 1. Now, that last slide, or second to last slide, I was really plugging apps and said apps are great. So use Sumo Logic apps. They help you and they solve every problem in the world. Well, not being a little extreme on that, but let's go ahead and take a look at them and see how easy they are to use and how easy they are, more importantly, to configure. So what we want to do is we want to utilize the Amazon EKS app. So what I want to do is I want to go into Sumo Logic, and on the far left, I should see a black bar. If I don't see a black bar, it's probably hidden. And so I can go to the very top of the screen and click on the hamburger icon, and that will expand it out. Once it's expanded out, go to App Catalog. Now, when you go to our app catalog, what you're seeing are all these different apps. And once again, these apps are essentially queries and dashboards that we are going to provide to you, that somebody at Sumo has created. And then you are going to utilize them to overlay against your data. And you're going to get that output or that benefit of understanding your data without doing much legwork. And so here are some of the apps, or not some of the apps, here are all the apps. There's about, probably about 200, maybe 150. Ranging from all over the place, from starting with 1Password in AWS all the way down to Zscaler. So A to Z is really covered in there. Now for today's class or today's session, let me get that lab guide over here. We want to use that Amazon EKS app. So what I want to do is either search for it or scroll for it, or probably just take advantage of the search capabilities of the app catalog and look for Amazon EKS. So this is the app I want to look for, and I want to go ahead and click on it now. Now, what it's going to show me is a preview. Now, this is not my data. This is just an example of what I can get. But as we see here, we can start to get EKS API server data, EKS API server audit data. And I should rephrase that. It's not getting the data. It's utilizing the data that has already been ingested. In this example, we have already pre-populated is an okay way to say it, Kubernetes data. It's currently flowing into the system, and now we want to view it. So what I'm going to do here, as the lab guide tells me to, is I'm now going to click on Add Integration. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Add Integration. And what I'm going to do now is, well, I'm going to fill in the blanks, but what I'm essentially doing now is telling the system where my data is. So I have a few things I need to fill out here. And the order might be a little bit different than what's in the lab guide. Well, actually, it should be the same. So this is going to be the most important portion here, is this log source. So currently I have Kubernetes data in my system, but I need to tell the system where that Kubernetes data is. And source category is a mechanism that we at Sumo Logic utilize. It's essentially a metadata tag. And so what I've done, or somebody has done in my company, is when the data gets ingested, it gets a tag applied to it. And I can now utilize that tag to search for that data. So to look for or find my EKS log source data, I'm going to use the source category, and I'm going to tell the system, look in the source category of labs/Kubernetes, v2/EKS. As I'm typing it, the search ahead is helping me, and so I can go ahead and just click on it if I'm, I was going to say lazy. Actually, I should use it because the system is recognizing that format's a little more correct. So I'm going to click on it. The folder name, I'm going to customize here. I'm just going to add my initials, and I'd encourage you to do so. We have a small group, but just if you guys are overlapping on your login accounts and you save it as the same name, there'll be conflict. So in this case, I'm just trying to avoid conflict. And then I'm going to click Next. And I should get a message that says success. Now, just because it says success doesn't necessarily mean I did it right. I could still have a typo in there. I don't want to assume a typo, but it's not true validation. But what I do want to show next is that true validation. So what I want to do now is I want to go to, and let me just resize my screen here. It's just getting a little, that's a little bit better, is I want to go to my personal folder. So in the black bar, I have 4 tabs up here. I wanted to go to the one that has a person. So I'm clicking on that personal tab. And when I do, I should now see that Amazon EKS control plane with my initials. There might be other stuff in there. There might be a lot of other stuff in there, but for today, I'd want to look for the thing that's relevant. So I'm going to go ahead and just recognize that that's there. I'm going to click on it. And now I have all these dashboards. So hopefully you're to that same step. If you need help, of course, please holler. But otherwise, I'll continue. So we now have the app we've now utilized the app to create dashboards. And now what we want to do is view those dashboards. And so that's going to be lab 2. So in lab 2, let's look at the dashboard. So once again, black bar, far left, personal EKS control plane. And we're going to go ahead and select one of the options. I'm going to go ahead and use, actually the wording here is a little bit weird. I'm going to go ahead and use the EKS API server audit. So it says to open the Amazon EKS app. It's actually opening the Amazon EKS folder. And then I'm going to select API server audit. And feel free to poke around. If you want to go ahead and jump in and click on things and click on those other ones, feel free to. We're going to look at, actually, we aren't going to use any of the other ones, but feel free to poke around. Once I log in, once I click on it, it now welcomes me. This new dashboard style is new-ish for Sumo Logic. And so it's giving you just a reminder of a new feature. But I'll X out of that because that's not really what I care about. What I do care about, though, is what's being shown here in this API server audit. So what is being shown here? Well, a lot of stuff. It's a pretty big diagram or a chart. What I see at the bottom is some just some notes that somebody has put in. And once again, somebody at Sumo that's describing some of these values. But what I see from the top is now I start to see top 10 URLs with problem status codes. Well, if one of these has a lot of problem status codes, I probably want to check it out and see what's going on. Here are top 10 or top URLs with non-200s. When we're looking at this is web server data. Remember, 200 is good. Anything else but 200 is bad. 404 is probably the best example of bad. But certainly this is helpful. Why is this one showing up twice in the past 15 minutes as being I'm using kind of air quotes for the word bad. The most active users, starting to see who's active. Failures, and kind of, I don't want to just read these panels to you, kind of them, but we're starting to see all this information. And what we can start to do is, as it says, the dashboard's pretty big, we can start to decide how high is the failure rate. So here's the failure rate, 2.5%. Is that bad? Is that good? Well, at least it's giving us a value to start to make that decision. Is it trending higher? Well, we can't really tell here, to be honest. But what we do see are the status code trends. And so we start to see that there are some other status codes that are occurring. Here are 200s that we want, but we have 201s, we have 404s, and so we have those other status code. Just going through the lab book, what are the top failure reasons? Well, they're right here. Not found is that major top one. So we need to figure out why those are not being found. And then so on and so forth. Let's see, just go to, the last portion on here, have any requests reached the panic stage? And what we have here is, as it says, each request can be recorded with an associated stage. And so here are the known stages. And so panic is a stage. And I don't think we have any in that stage currently. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think we have any in that stage here. Now, as mentioned, there are the other panels. If you want to go ahead and click on them, it's not really lab exercises around them, but just to continue kind of the idea of, here's your information. Now I'm looking at all this stuff, and I'm using stuff kind of loosely, but here I'm seeing API servers, successful versus failed requests, excuse me. So in this diagram here, it's showing me a decrease in successfuls. Well, the fails are pretty level, so maybe that's just a downtime for using our service. Let's see, anything else in here to point out? They're all pretty cool in their own way. All right, I don't know, cool is the right word, but helpful is the right word. All right. So hopefully you've got the ability to play around with those. And as it says here, and it's an important item to note, and I feel like everybody or many of you probably do know this, but as a reminder, the answers to the questions that I just went through do vary. Kubernetes is ephemeral. It's always changing. These services, these pods are getting stood up and shut down within seconds sometimes minutes, it varies. And so the data is always changing, and this visual gives you that ability. And so you could imagine this in a command center or a knock board or something like that, and somebody walking by might know, hey, there's problems with these URLs. Maybe somebody should be fixing them or something like that. All right, what I'd like to do next is, this will be the last thing we do. We're going to let's do lab 3. So what I want to do is utilize lab 3 to start to look at a Kubernetes hierarchy. The apps, when we use those were taking our Kubernetes data and overlaying queries and dashboards on top of them. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at the Kubernetes hierarchy and utilize the auto discovery as well as other features to see the hierarchy. Can't really put it any better than that. So let's jump into lab 3. With lab 3, we're going to do a different feature of Sumo Logic. We're going to use the Explore tab or Explore feature. So what I would like you to do is go to the very top of the screen and go to the plus new. Go ahead and click on that guy, and then go down to Explore. As I mentioned, you can use the keyboard shortcut of Alt-G. I don't really use it too much, but it does work. And what you should get loaded to is something like this. Now, I'm going to pause here. The screen looks quite bad, and it is, but I'll explain why. I just want to make sure we're all together first. So hopefully you went to new, you went to Explore, and you see this screen with just no results, essentially. Now, there's a reason they're showing no results, or hopefully there's a reason. The reason is we have the ability to choose some many different options here. We can choose what we want to explore by. And then we can also go ahead and choose what apps or clusters we want to explore by. And so my app components one just doesn't have any data. Remember, this is a training environment. Some things work, some don't. Some are in various stages because they're not supposed to work. And so it's just putting us in a default kind of a weird spot. But what I do want to do and should be able to do is change my explore by view. Now, my explore by view is going to give me a lot of different views. Do I want to explore by my services? Do I want to explore by my deployments, or by my namespaces? And in this case, we'll keep it Kubernetes focused with the top 4, but then I can also look at AWS data and observability. That's not really today's focus, but we can go into that. And like I said, feel free to poke around while we're playing in here. So what I want to do is I want to go to Kubernetes node view. And let's see, does it say it in the lab guide? It doesn't, and it should. What I want to choose is, let's see, any of these other ones should probably work. The fun of a demo, doing it live. Here, okay. So what I'd like you to use is the coffee bar training cluster. So what we did is we went to Kubernetes node view, and then we're going to choose the coffee bar training. The other ones, like I said, just other use cases. So they may work, they may not, but this one does and is pretty illustrative. And so what we're looking at here by default is the Kubernetes cluster overview. We also have many other options in here, and we're going to select the security overview in a moment. But before I do, just to show you the one that it defaults to. And so with this cluster overview, it's showing us for our coffee bar app. We have a coffee bar app that we use for some examples. We start to see things like CPU, memory usage, disk space, etc. We start to see those honeycombs. Darker the color, the more utilization might be taking place. But for this example, to continue with the idea of security, let's go ahead and go to the Kubernetes security overview. It should be down towards the bottom. There should just be one. And go ahead and click on it. And so now this dashboard is going to give us security related information. Once again, we have some notes that we or somebody has put in this case, just describing about Falco rules and the different type of priorities that are available. But on the far right, what we're starting to see is those security events. Fortunately, we've looked at, or it's still going, it's going to take a few moments to load, but in the past 7 days, it's analyzed 20 million events. That's a lot of events. Of those events, it found 0 emergency alerts, 0 critical alerts, which is good, but it found a bunch of errors, which is bad. But at least we're starting to group these things into security-minded focus. Is it an emergency? Is it critical? And starting to evaluate that. Down here, we see the rules that have been triggered, or the top 10 rules more specifically. And so we can start to see that the majority of the rules that have been triggered are around creating that pod. Other rules that have been triggered, you see them around here, deletion of namespaces, the pod creation in the Kubernetes namespace, et cetera, et cetera. We see our top 10 actions triggered. And some more stuff. So before I go into that, more stuff as the lab guide gives in step 4, some things we can look at. So for example, for the events timeline, is it going down? Is it going up? Well, we see it actually went up a little bit and then went down. So that's good. It's going down. Down is usually good. Of the rules triggered by severity, what type of severity is greatest? And so we can go ahead. Rule triggered by, actually, where is it on here? Rule triggered, should be in here somewhere. Oh, top action triggered. I guess this one's good enough. But we start to see these rules that have been triggered. All right, let's see, anything else in here? All right, so let's start to wrap things up. Actually, I'm going to give you a little bit of bonus time back today. But as it says, just with the lab guide, just the last couple of things, and I should have pointed out that first. If it has no data, go ahead and try a different container, a different time period. Once again, this is a training environment. The data is ephemeral. It just might not be there for a moment, but it should pop back up pretty quickly. All right, let me go back to my slide deck. The one other thing I did want to show, I alluded to earlier, is that the self-paced course. Let me just show where they are, just because I'm a trainer and as a training manager, I'd feel negligent if I didn't show this. What you can do is you can go to certification and you can get certified. And we offer free certifications. I'm not really going to plug that too much, although I guess I am inadvertently by going into it. But the portion I did want to point out is actually, when you log in with your real account, you would have more options, but you have the ability to start to view our course catalogs and access recorded training, as well as access our self-paced courses. And one of those self-paced courses is that Helm installation to get you set up with Kubernetes. All right, let me go back to my lab deck, slide deck. Let me go ahead. I think we're about good here. So we did lab 1, we did lab 2, wrapped it up with lab 3. And so I'm going to open up to questions about Sumo, about Kubernetes, about AWS, of course, for myself, for Dilip. If not, that's fine. No forcing questions, of course. All right, so one of the things I just want, actually, this is a little bit old. Let me go ahead and just put this link out as well. I should have updated that slide. Is I just wanted to point you to, if you want to learn more about Sumo Logic, particularly training, which is, like I said, my focus. I'll put this link in the Slack if you'd like to join us. And here we have the ability for you to register for workshops and other classes we offer. All right, so thank you everybody for attending. On behalf of myself and Dilip, enjoyed the session. Hopefully you got something out of it. Dilip, anything you want to throw out there to plug or promote?
Oh, no, nothing else. I guess we will be doing more of these immersion days and workshops. So please stay tuned and join us next time. Until then, thank you so much for joining.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Okay,
Bye
thanks.
all.
Bye.